Your shredded rags aren't even fit to be a doormat in my mansion. You crippled little servant, the arrogant broker scoffed as his expensive leather shoe ground a meticulously hand-embroidered vintage rose deep into the muddy pavement. Mary fell to her knees in the freezing rain. She desperately tried to shield the fragile silk, weeping helplessly as the storm tore at the last surviving heritage of her village. She was used to the cruelty of the world, but seeing her life's work trampled was simply too much to bear. Suddenly, a quiet, unassuming single father stepped out of the cold shadows. He didn't say a single word to the laughing rich man. Instead, he knelt right there in the filthy mud. He gently picked up each crushed, naturally dyed thread, his eyes burning with a quiet, terrifying rage that could melt steel. Hello, everyone. The truest heritage is never woven with gold or silver. It is grown from the sweat, the tears, and the resilient pride of a pure soul. These are the most precious gems in the eyes of God. If you believe in protecting human dignity, please hit that subscribe button right now and leave this exact prayer in the comments below. I vow to dedicate my diligent heart to weave the most beautifully radiant tapestry of destiny. To understand how we got to this heartbreaking moment in the rain, we have to go back to a quiet, forgotten corner of the city. Down a narrow cobblestone alley, far away from the glittering skyscrapers, sat Mary's modest weaving workshop. It wasn't a fancy boutique. It was a dusty, sunlit sanctuary filled with wooden looms and glass jars of dried flowers. Mary was an orphan who carried the weight of the world on her shoulders. Literally, she had a slight hunchback and a massive jagged scar trailing down her spine. These weren't birth defects. They were the brutal medals of honor she earned years ago during a horrific fire. She had rushed into a burning building to save a trapped child, and a blazing wooden beam had collapsed right on top of her. The world often looked at her twisted spine and turned away in disgust. But heaven always balances the scales. In exchange for her physical limitations, Mary was gifted with a genius, almost supernatural sense of smell. She could close her eyes and differentiate between 1,000 different roots, petals, and barks. She could smell the exact mineral content in a batch of crushed madder root or the morning dew trapped in dried indigo. This rare gift allowed her perfectly identify and recreate the exact natural dyes used in ancient lost brocades. Her hands, though scarred, could restore century-old tapestries flawlessly. While Mary was spinning threads in her quiet corner, a man named Henry was walking through hell in a custom suit. To the public, Henry was just a tired, grieving single father. He looked exhausted. His shoulders slumped beneath the weight of a sorrow he couldn't shake. He was leading his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, by the hand. Lily was a ghost of a child. Ever since a devastating family tragedy stripped away her mother, the little girl had completely shut down. She hadn't spoken a single word in over a year. She hadn't smiled, she hadn't cried, she just stared blankly at the ground. Doctors and therapists had tried everything, but her mind was locked away in a dark, silent fortress. Henry was secretly touring the old artisan district that day. He told his staff he was surveying original materials and scouting for authentic heritage art pieces. But in reality, he was just desperately walking his daughter through different environments, praying that something, anything, would spark a light in her dead eyes. They wandered into Mary's alley purely by chance. Other wealthy merchants in the district had practically chased Mary away that morning, mocking her posture and calling her a cursed beggar. But when Henry and Lily stepped into the humble workshop, the atmosphere instantly shifted. Mary didn't look at them as potential bags of money. She didn't offer a desperate sales pitch. Instead, her warm, observant eyes immediately locked onto the little girl's trembling hands and hollow gaze. Mary knew what deep, unspoken trauma looked like. She had lived in it for years. Without saying a word, Mary slowly hobbled over to her wooden work table. She pulled out a bundle of special raw silk threads that she had dyed herself using a secret blend of calming herbs. There was wild chamomile, sweet lavender, and a hint of ancient pine bark. The soft, soothing fragrance immediately filled the dusty room, cutting through the heavy tension. Mary sat down at her loom and began to work her magic. She didn't just weave a piece of fabric. Using her incredibly precise hands and the fragrant threads, she began to embroider a stunning, vibrant fairy tale right onto a piece of blank silk. She whispered softly to the little girl as her needle danced across the fabric. She told Lily that broken wings don't mean you can never touch the sky again. They just mean you have to find a different kind of magic to lift you up. The little girl's eyes slowly widened, absorbing the scent of the calming lavender and the deep, rich colors of the ancient threads. Every single stitch was a testament to Mary's immense patience and untainted kindness. Henry stood paralyzed near the doorway. He had spent millions of dollars on top-tier psychologists and luxury retreats. None of them could reach his daughter. Yet, here in a rundown shack with a leaky roof, a woman society deemed worthless was doing the impossible. The sheer empathy radiating from Mary's hunched frame was the most beautiful thing Henry had ever witnessed. Mary gently laid the finished fragrant silk across Lily's small shoulders. The herbal scent wrapped around the little girl like a warm, protective hug. For a long, agonizing minute, the room was dead silent. Then something impossible happened. Lily's tiny fingers reached up and traced the embroidered bird. Her lips trembled. A soft, tearful, but undeniably radiant smile broke across her face. It was the first time she had smiled in over 400 days. She leaned forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Mary's neck, burying her face in the weaver's shoulder. Henry fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as the crushing weight of his depression finally shattered. The heavy, suffocating darkness that had gripped his family for over a year was finally dissolving. And it was all because of the pure, unselfish heart of a crippled weaver. When absolute sincerity touches a broken heart, miracles truly happen. Let's take a moment to manifest this beautiful healing energy into our own lives. Please join Mary and write down this powerful vow in the comments right now. I vow to dedicate my diligent heart to weave the most beautifully radiant tapestry of destiny. The fragile piece in the workshop was violently shattered just a few hours later. The sky outside had suddenly turned a bruised, angry purple, and a heavy, freezing rain began to pound against the tin roof. The wooden door was violently kicked open. In walked the wealthy broker who had originally commissioned Mary to restore the ancient brocade rose. He shook his expensive silk umbrella, intentionally splashing dirty rainwater all over Mary's clean wooden floor. He impatiently snapped his fingers and demanded to see the finished piece. Mary carefully brought out the stunning, perfectly restored silk, expecting the payment she desperately needed to keep her workshop alive and buy winter supplies. Instead, the broker just sneered at her masterpiece. He reached into his designer wallet and tossed a single crumpled $20 bill onto the table. Mary was absolutely stunned. She gently but firmly reminded him that they had agreed on $3,000 for the months of meticulous, back-breaking labor she had put into the fabric. The broker laughed so hard, his face turned red. He looked at her hunched spine and the faded scar on her neck with absolute disgust. He told her she should be on her knees thanking him for even giving her a 20. He said that high art belonged exclusively in the pristine hands of upper-class elites, not a crippled, ugly servant from the muddy slums. When Mary bravely reached out to take her silk back, the broker viciously snatched it away. He said if she wouldn't accept his generous charity, then her trash wasn't worth keeping at all. He turned around and walked right out into the freezing storm. He ripped the delicate silk with his bare hands and threw it onto the muddy pavement. And that brings us right back to that heartbreaking moment in the rain. Your shredded rags aren't even fit to be a doormat in my mansion. You crippled little servant. He ground the vintage rose deep into the mud with his heavy leather shoe, destroying months of Mary's life. Mary fell to her knees in the freezing downpour, weeping helplessly as she tried to shield her ruined masterpiece from the storm. But she wasn't alone anymore. Henry, who had been quietly watching the entire horrific scene from the back room where Lily was resting, stepped out into the cold shadows. He didn't yell at the arrogant man. He didn't throw a violent punch. He simply knelt in the filthy mud beside Mary and began picking up the crushed, naturally dyed threads one by one. His eyes were terrifyingly calm, but they burned with a quiet, calculated rage that could melt solid steel. The broker scoffed, asking Henry who the hell he thought he was, playing Captain Save-A-Beggar in the middle of a storm. Henry slowly stood up to his full height. He pulled a sleek, waterproof phone from his custom coat pocket and wiped the rain from the screen. He looked dead into the broker's eyes and finally spoke his full name, Henry Sterling. The broker's arrogant, mocking smile instantly vanished from his face. All the blood drained from his cheeks as his knees began to visibly shake uncontrollably. Henry Sterling wasn't just some random wealthy guy trying to play hero. He was the undisputed, untouchable king of the national art world. He personally owned the largest chain of fine art museums and the most prestigious antique auction house in the entire country. This arrogant broker was nothing but a bottom-feeding middleman who relied entirely on Henry's auction network to make a living. He was basically a speck of dirt on Henry's shoe, and he had just insulted the man's personal savior. Henry didn't even blink as he dialed a private number on his phone. He made one single softly spoken command to his massive legal team. Within 60 seconds, Henry purchased the entire commercial district block they were standing on with a massive cash wire. He immediately terminated the broker's office lease, effective that very second. But Henry wasn't finished destroying him yet. Henry issued a permanent nationwide blacklist command through his corporate network. He stripped the broker of his trading licenses and banned him from ever stepping foot inside any gallery, auction house, or art dealership in the country ever again. The arrogant man lost his entire career, his elite reputation, and his multi-million-dollar business in less than a minute. He fell to his knees in the dirty puddles, crying hysterically and begging for mercy, pleading that it was all just a terrible misunderstanding. Henry completely ignored his pathetic cries. He gently wrapped his warm, dry cashmere coat around Mary's shivering shoulders. Little Lily ran out from the doorway and grabbed Mary's hand, pulling her safely back inside the warm workshop. Justice is always served when the right person recognizes your true worth. Henry stepped in, to protect the brilliant, beautiful light that Mary brought into this dark world. Let's celebrate this beautiful victory for the underdog and send them our best wishes. Please drop this exact prayer in the comments below. I vow to dedicate my diligent heart to weave the most beautifully radiant tapestry of destiny. Fast forward to 6 months later, the atmosphere inside the Grand Royal Auction House was absolutely electric. Under the glowing massive crystal chandeliers, the elite members of society sat in hushed, breathless awe. Displayed on the velvet center stage was Mary's ultimate masterpiece. She and Henry had spent weeks meticulously cleaning and reweaving the crushed vintage rose, blending the scars of the torn fabric into a breathtaking, entirely new design. The head auctioneer slammed his heavy wooden gavel down on the podium. The room erupted in a deafening, thunderous round of applause. The brilliantly restored brocade had just sold for a record-breaking $2 million. But the staggering amount of money wasn't even the most beautiful part of the evening. Later that night, the grand private hall of the museum was illuminated by thousands of flickering warm pillar candles. The air was thick with the sweet, romantic scent of vintage camellias and fresh, calming lavender. Henry stood before Mary, looking incredibly handsome, holding a small velvet box in his hands. He didn't just offer her the official title of Supreme Director of his entire global art empire. He got down on one knee and asked her to be his wife and a permanent mother to the little girl who was now spinning happily around the room, laughing out loud with pure joy. Mary looked at her beautiful new family, tears of absolute happiness streaming down her face, and nodded yes. A beautiful piece of silk might be torn by a cruel hand, and a precious heritage might be trampled by arrogant boots. But true, authentic talent and a resilient, remarkably kind spirit can never be permanently buried in the mud. The world will always eventually recognize your incredible value if you refuse to let cruel people change your good heart. If this story warmed your soul today, please hit that subscribe button to our channel so we can keep bringing you these incredible journeys of justice and healing. And before you leave us today, make a promise to yourself and write this final vow in the comments section. I vow to dedicate my diligent heart to weave the most beautifully radiant tapestry of destiny.